Hello, welcome everyone to the March forecast for 2025. And I would like to share my screen and we will get going. And so today we're going to be talking about what is coming up for us. And I have to say, March is a very exciting month. So we have Venus going retrograde March 1st. We also have a total lunar eclipse kicking off our eclipse season. And with Venus going retrograde, we then have Mercury going retrograde just 2 weeks later, which will be interesting. And we also have the start of Aries season with the sun ingressing into Aries. And we also have Neptune moving into Aries at the end of the month. So we're going to go into depth with some of these different astrological happenings. So the magic of Venus. Venus has a beautiful orbit and she has a pattern every 8 years. She makes this beautiful rose pattern in the sky. And we're going to talk more about Venus and her magic in a different podcast, perhaps in the future with this. And every 2 years or so, she goes retrograde. And whenever Venus goes retrograde, we can kind of revisit, rethink, reflect on our relationships just as a basic kind of way to approach it. Moving into the lunar eclipses. So we have a full moon total lunar eclipse March 14th. Backing up a smidge, in 2023, we finished the last of the Aries Libra axis eclipses, although we do have the solar eclipse coming up in March, which will complete the entirety of those eclipses because the nodes move about every 18 months. And so that shifts the way the eclipse falls, depending where the nodes are, because the nodes are the orbital path of the moon, the ecliptic of the moon, when it's crossing the ecliptical apparent path of the sun around the earth, because we know the earth goes around the sun, but from our perspective, the sun goes around us. So when the nodes and the nodes are when the moon's ecliptic path crosses the sun's ecliptic path, apparent path of the sun. With Aries and Libra, we were talking about themes of enlightened selfishness, evaluating your involvement with others and kind of making sure that you aren't pleasing people to excess, that you can advocate for yourself. We can talk about cooperative leadership with that. And then independence versus connection. So we're shifting, the nodes shifted in January into Pisces and Virgo. And so about 2 weeks before the actual eclipse, we enter into the portal. So basically March 1st or so, we will be entering into the portal. And the full moon eclipse is interesting because it's taking place at 23 degrees Virgo. And we talked about Venus going retrograde the beginning of the month, March 1st. It's interesting because Venus is going to go direct on this exact degree, 23 degrees Virgo. I'm sorry, 23 degrees Pisces in April. So that's going to be interesting. And we want to kind of see the last eclipse we had was in September of 2024. So there was something that can be evolving over your life over these past 6 months. Lunar eclipses are felt to be something more internal, something more kind of hidden or more emotional that we might experience. And because it's something might be falling away from you. And if it's falling away from you, the advice is just let it go. It's probably not meant to be in your life anymore, and that's okay. We talk about old stories around the South Node and kind of letting those things go. So if you're aware of Marie Kondo, she would hold things up and say, does this bring you joy? Thinking about lunar eclipses, you're releasing something, holding things up in your life and saying, does this really bring me joy? And I think it's really a great time because with the South Node being in Virgo, this is the most discerning sign. We think about separating the wheat from the chaff. We edit things so that they're perfect. We have a system of organization that makes sense to us. It's a very grounded and earthy sign, even though it is mutable, which means there's some flexibility there. So the time of culmination is when we have full moons or lunar eclipses. And so we're letting go of things we've outgrown. And we can kind of think about eclipses are like when the light gets turned off and turned back on, things shift. And that's a really powerful thing. This eclipse is going to be really important for you if you have personal planets around 20 to 26 degrees of the mutable signs. So we're looking at Virgo, we're looking at Sagittarius, we're looking at Pisces, and we're looking at Gemini. Those are all the mutable signs. And so if you have things around there, it might be more powerful for you. It's also interesting that during this eclipse, Mercury is at 9 degrees Aries. And this is going to come up where the new moon solar eclipse happens in just 2 weeks. So that's interesting. And we also see the sun is in a Saturn-Neptune sandwich. That's got to be interesting there, right? Because Saturn kind of is that slowing down for us sometimes, getting clear on things. It can feel like an authority. And in Neptune's kind of more this dissolving, it's more this becoming one with everything. And they're both heading towards the end of the sign, their time in this sign. So this eclipse, we're already looking at letting go. These planets are getting ready to shift into Aries coming up here. So I think this might be a really powerful time. Spring's just around the corner. And one of the ways we can actually spur on this energy is actually doing some spring cleaning. So I think this would be a really great time to start going through things and saying, does this bring me joy or not, and moving through things. Where the eclipses fall in your own personal houses can give you more an idea. So if it's falling in your first house and your seventh house, there might be questions about, what are some old stories I have about relationships, how I can be an advocate for myself, or maybe I need to listen to my partner more, however that dynamic goes for you, depending on all the other things in your chart. Moving to this next slide here. So this is going to be 2 weeks later, and this will be the new moon solar eclipse. It's a new moon because the sun and the moon are right next to each other. It's a dark sky. And this is happening at 9 degrees Aries. That's where Mercury just was 2 weeks prior. So this is usually what we consider more external. It's more things that kind of can happen around us in our daily life, because the sun is kind of our outward identity. And again, we just kind of released some stuff 2 weeks ago. So now this is kind of welcoming in things for a new start. And eclipses typically fall in patterns of every 18 years. So you can even think about what was going on in 2007, because sometimes you see themes repeated or things that might come up from the past. Moving next into Mercury going retrograde, this will be March 15th, and it will be at 9 degrees Aries. And this is going to end April 7th, and he's going to go back all the way to 26 degrees Pisces. So there's a lot of movement between Aries and Pisces, personal planets as well as the outer planets. So if you're feeling like I'm kind of starting something, but I don't really think I'm ready yet, it's a little bit confusing, totally normal. And when planets are in retrograde, this is a great time. Mercury retrograde is reflection, reevaluation, reviewing things. And there's a great phrase by Suzanne Giesemann, and she often says, isn't that interesting, as a way to pause and to generate reflection. And so basically, when we go inward with Mercury, you want to think before you speak. You want to reread your emails, making sure you have plenty of time at the airport, double checking your tickets, just little simple things that when we get into a rush, we can kind of have things fall through the cracks. So just being aware that this is a really good time just to kind of dot your I's and cross your T's, that kind of a thing. And especially with, the eclipses in Virgo and Pisces with the nodes in those signs, this is a great time to pay attention to detail, because it's kind of slowing things down enough that you kind of really see with that clear vision and really picking out the really important things and prioritizing stuff. So having these personal planets in retrograde during Pisces season, I think it's really nice to kind of listen to ourselves, develop our intuition. Then the sun is going to enter Aries. We're going to have Aries season. So right now we're finishing up Pisces season. We're in the Pisces season. And this is wonderful for connecting to that which connects all of us, this consciousness idea, and kind of dreaming things. And when the sun is shifting into Aries, this is kind of starting something fresh, desire or courage to begin something new. Aries really is here to learn courage. When you're up against stressful things, that's when you realize, oh, I can actually do this. And it pushes you and makes you better, it makes you stronger. And it's really a great time to manifest and set goals, taking charge of your dreams, springtime planting those seeds, staking a claim, being comfortable taking up space, getting your fires burning again. So, kind of feeling this ingress too is a time of a cosmic restart, as spring always is for us as we start that new season. And then the last really interesting thing is that Neptune is going to shift into Aries. So a little bit about Neptune. Neptune takes 165 years for it to seemingly orbit the Earth. We know nothing orbits the Earth, but from the geocentric perspective as an astrologer, it's 165 years. And the last time it was discovered in 1846. The last time Neptune was in Pisces was from 1847 to 1862. Our current Neptune cycle started in 2012. The last time Neptune was in Aries was from 1861 to 1875. And the Civil War was from 1861 to 1865. So there was a battle over slavery, what was just, fighting for equality. And there's also this rise of spiritualism, which I think is really interesting, and new religious movements. There was kind of a new way to seek mystical and metaphysical ways of being in the world. And as Neptune shifts into Aries in 2025, it will stay there until 2039. 0 degrees Aries is the start of the zodiacal belt, and it is considered part of the world axis. This is a very important point within the zodiac, within our understanding of astrology. So Neptune is the great dissolver. It can sometimes make you feel like you're in a fog. It might make you really struggle to have a grip on reality in some ways. It can also be a point of where we lose things or surrender things because there's a greater understanding we need to have. Neptune's also associated with dreams and intuition, definitely the subconscious. It can also bring an incredible sensitivity and imagination, and creativity and compassion. So with Neptune shifting into Aries, putting this together, we can think about spiritual warriors. We can think about advocating for spirituality and enlightenment. This could be maybe a lot of people having a spiritual awakening, because all this time with Neptune and Pisces, things like, mediumship and intuition and astrology and all these kind of like pseudoscience-y things have really been more prominently featured. There's apps for astrology now. Would you ever have thought that's possible in like the 1980s? I mean, it's fascinating. So I feel like the collective has been prepped for this. And now with Neptune shifting to Aries, it's that courage to explore the transcendental. It could be a collective urge to break free from old patterns or traditions, because sometimes Aries can feel kind of like that masculinity. And so really considering that creativity and innovation and encouraging you to be the explorer of your own connection to source through spirituality. We could also even say intuitive action. People are getting really curious about consciousness. So I really encourage people to have like your own experiences, because nothing is more obvious than when you're experiencing something yourself in some way. On the downside, there could be conflicts regarding misinformation or distortions of the truth or confused communications. We need to watch idealizing things or having certain beliefs about system that are kind of misguided, or maybe even like toxic masculinity. That could be one of the things that we could see. And we know that the year of the snake is this year in the Chinese calendar. So it's also an opportunity to kind of shed our skins and start something new, maybe doing different structures. So leaving behind the old with these eclipses and then embracing something that works better. And, resistance to change can be absolutely exhausting. So it's just not that productive. And when we look at the first half of 2025, we've just had Pluto shift into Aquarius, which is the farthest of the modern planets as far as our relationship to it. And the node shifted from Aries and Libra to Pisces and Virgo last month, in January. And then Neptune shifting into Aries. Saturn's going to shift into Aries in May. Jupiter's going to shift into Cancer, and then that's in June, and then Uranus will shift into Gemini in July. So there's a lot of these outer planets that spend anywhere from 2.5 years to 100 and Neptune's 165 years, and then Pluto's 248 years. A lot of these outer planets that are shifting, and they're going from earthy water signs to fire and air, which is really, really interesting. And that second half of 2025, we're going to have some interesting supportive aspects between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And I want to talk really quickly about Saturn and Neptune being together. So February 20th of 2026 is when they're actually going to meet Saturn and Neptune at 0 degrees Aries, 45 minutes. And they'll be within a 2-degree orb of each other from May of 2025 until March of 2026. And so that could be the signs that will be affected by this are people who are within like 28 degrees of the mutable signs up to 2 degrees of the cardinal. So we're looking at Pisces and Aries, Gemini and Cancer, Virgo and Libra, and then Sagittarius and Capricorn. These two planets, Saturn and Neptune, they meet up every 36 years or so, but this is a really interesting time because of everything else that's happening within the cosmos. So it can kind of feel like a brand new possibility. There could be some disillusionment and discovery of something to believe in. There could be like these ands, or kind of things that are kind of like these juxtapositionings that can happen. There could be like an indeterminate reality or virtual reality, especially with Pluto and Aquarius, and AI has really been on the rise. Saturn is dealing in facts and truths, and then Neptune's kind of like a fog or a projection. So Saturn's going to help Neptune kind of fact check and be grounded a little bit more. And then Neptune's going to kind of question the certainty of Saturn. There's nothing more interesting than someone who's absolutely convinced in just one thing and they've lost that peripheral vision to learn something new or have a different perspective on things. And so we can think about religion and faith versus science and truth. So I personally feel like science and like the metaphysical, the religious, these different ways we understand things that we can have personal experiences with, but not quite quantitate in a double-blind randomized controlled placebo trial or certain scientific experiments. I think there's going to be more of a blending or an understanding of things coming together with this Saturn and Neptune, and then shifting everything from that Pisces to Aries. So one of the things I recently listened to, it was Alex Ferrari on his Next Level Soul podcast. He had a woman named Cheryl Page on, and she's kind of like this scientist, but also kind of a mystic. I love her. She's really, really interesting. And she talked about serotiny. Now, this is why I have the pine cone on the slide. So these types of trees hold on to their seeds. So like the cones themselves have this really thick layer of resin. It's that sticky stuff when you touch the pine cones. And they wait for an environmental trigger. And one of the most common triggers for these types of trees are a natural fire, which can happen every 50 to 150 years. So trees have evolved to resist high heat due to lightning over millions of years. And so they've incorporated that resiliency into how they reproduce. So in serotinous conifers, the seeds are sealed shut with this really thick coating of resin. And when the temperature gets to 122 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, it sort of melts the resin, and these scales kind of open up. And you think about like the sci-fi movie Alien, when like the things crinkle out, it's like it's not like that, but it's just interesting how there's like this melting process that happens. And the seeds are so deep within these scales, they're protected from the fire. So they're actually, they're ready to be blown away. And what the fire does is it basically raises all of the different plants around that tree. So there's less competition. There's more light because the organic material is now gone. So there's light, there's the nutrients from the ashes. So basically, I'm bringing this up because I feel like Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries has this dissolving effect on what is holding us together to kind of release something deeper within us to repopulate the new soil. I don't know about you, but it kind of feels like right now everything's burning around us. And, Pluto goes into Aquarius. One of the things Pluto can do is like burn things down to the studs. So it kind of feels like in this high heat environment, we weren't left without nothing. We have these seeds of amazingness within each of us and within the community that we're going to melt now. We're going to release this brand new or this new seed into the world that hopefully can grow into something amazing. And so basically, I just want to leave you with that neat thing about serotiny, because there's all these different levels of evolution that all these amazing organisms on Earth have done. And I kind of feel like if we take the approach of all these things that are happening recently are there to catalyze us, they're there to help us have the strength and the courage to move forward and uh, take more of an interest in consciousness or things that can help us grow and help each other as a collective, I think, as well. So I want to say thank you to the Wholeness Network for having me on for the month of March. And I want to wish you a very happy spring and all the best to you. So have a fabulous, fabulous time, and I will see you next month.